I reached out to the FBI, and I met with several men. In fact, agents came from out of town, flew in just for this meeting because it's a cold case, and they'd seen that I'd been reporting on and doing investigation into it, and so they wanted to hear what I'd exposed. And so we met right here in Los Angeles, and I broke it down for the agents, including the agent that today is in charge of the investigation all these years later. He wasn't even alive in 1985, but in any case, today he's in charge of the investigation, and I explained to him and the other agents what I'd learned. And of course, where these men are today, that they're living with impunity in Israel. Okay, admittedly, one of them, Manning, is already in jail for another completely unrelated murder, but these other two Kahanist killers are living at large in the Israeli occupied West Bank. So I asked these agents, okay, you haven't charged the killers, we know who they are, why haven't you indicted them? What's missing? What more evidence do you clearly had some evidence if you were following them out to the murder scene, but you clearly don't have enough evidence because you've never charged them. So what else do you need in order to lay charges? And what they told me was, look, you need to find someone from inside the organization that heard these men talking about the murder that they'd committed, that heard them admitting. Now, that's not difficult to find because these men are all considered heroes in the Kahana movement precisely because of these assassinations that they carried out. I've interviewed ex-Kahanists, like this young man who was a terrorist himself, born to a Kahanist father. He grew up in his Kahanist home, so that's all he knew. Today, as an adult, he's completely out of it. He's abandoned that path, and he's let's call him a liberal journalist trying to make up for his previous activities. But the point is, there's no shortage of people from within the Kahana movement who will say, yeah, of course, these guys are our heroes. They're killers. They're known killers. But it's not enough. What you need is not someone who said, yeah, I heard other members of the group saying that these guys are killers. That's well known. What the FBI needs is someone who heard the murderers admit it themselves, who heard one of these assassins admit to it or boast about it. If you can find them, any of them, anyone, then that'll be enough, they told me, together with all the other evidence we've assembled, that'll be enough to put it over the edge. Now, I didn't think that I would ever find such a person because so many decades later, and I mean, it's well known, what political perspective I'm coming from, so it's not so easy to extract information from cold-hearted Kahanists, but I thought, okay, I've got a few leads, at least let me do my due diligence and see where they lead. And sure enough, I surprised myself and I was able to find someone who claims to have done just that, to have witnessed a confession to the murder of Alex Saude by one of the killers themselves. Now, who's to say that he's telling the truth? Because the man that I found is a prisoner. He's sitting in jail right here in California for very serious crimes. He's been incarcerated for many years. And clearly, he has a reason for wanting to make a deal with the FBI, for exchanging information in return, for maybe reducing his sentence as a quid pro quo. So what's to say that this guy is even telling the truth? Maybe he's inventing the story out of whole cloth. And I was skeptical at first. But over the course of many, many months, I had dozens of conversations with him. He wrote me dozens of letters from his jail cell. And we had dozens of phone calls. I got a phone number here in California that would forward to my Israeli mobile so that he could call me from jail and we could speak over the phone and I could interview him about his recollections. And it took me a very, very long time. But in the end, I came to the conclusion that yes, he must be taken seriously because there's no way that anyone could know the things that he knows unless they were part of the inner circle, unless they were close to Irv Rubin, the head of the JDL. The amount of information he knows, yes, I know this, but I'm one of the handful of people who are experts on the Kahana movement. you know? And if only me and a handful of other people know this, and this guy knows this, then clearly there's no other conclusion to come to, but he really was on the inside of the JDL out here. And this is the story that he tells. I'll tell it in pictures. So going back to 1985, Irv Rubin is a father. He has a young son named Ari. Fast forward to 1989, according to this witness, he says that on that day, in late November 1989, he was sitting in a parking lot in the San Fernando Valley. To be specific, he was going to be selling guns to another criminal. As I said, this man is sitting in jail for a whole bunch of crimes, and so at that time, he was sitting in the parking lot waiting to make a deal for the guns he had, and all of a sudden, he sees Irv Rubin. He didn't know who Irv Rubin was, but he sees a man with his young son being confronted by a mugger. At that time, the witness, who I'll call V, he felt some sympathy. Even though he knew nothing about Irv Rubin, his partner was pregnant with his child. And so he felt some kinship, some empathy for Irv, seeing that he was being mugged right in front of his young son. And so he intervened. Well, the mugger had a knife, but V had a gun. And so he was able to defend Irv, and Irv beat the mugger, laid him down on the ground. And now, of course, Irv Rubin is over the moon. He's excited as anything because, you know, this guy, not only did he save him from this mugging, but after a few words are exchanged, he realizes that V is also Jewish. Now, amazing, you're a strong Jew and you support, you're a Jew with a gun. This is exactly the kind of Jew I want around me. And he invited him to join the Jewish Defense League. Now, V wasn't really interested in doing so because he came from a secular family. They weren't politically involved. They weren't strongly Zionists. And so he, politely refused Irv's invitation, but so he didn't come out to the various events in which the JDL would, harass and harangue pro-Palestinian activists here. Amongst other things, I've seen video of them right here in Los Angeles screaming at Palestinian Americans, screaming, "Dear Yassin," again and again. These are the disgusting activities that they would regularly perpetrate. But in any case, so V did not want to participate in any of that political activity, if you can call it political activity. But of course, he was interested in a new customer for his gun running. So according to V, they established a working relationship, and V says that at least once a month, I would sell guns to Irv Rubin, sometimes 20 at a time, sometimes just a handful. He says Irv, he preferred the handguns, but bought bigger stuff, like HK91 and HK94. So he has very specific memories about these interactions. In any case, on one of these occasions, these monthly occasions when he would sell guns to Irv, he came to his house in the San Fernando Valley, and at the time, Rubin's lieutenant, Krugel, was there as well, and he got an invitation. Irv said, "Why don't you come join us? We're about to go have a bite to eat." So he figures, why not? He joins them, and they head over to Los Alamitos, where there's an infamous Jewish deli there called the Catella Bakery. And they sit down at the bakery, but before they do so, they're driving in, they park their car, and then another car pulls up to join them. Now, who's in this car? 3 people, amongst them, Ben Yosef. This is a photo of what he looks like now in 1990, early 1990. And they sit down at a booth, and they begin to talk to one another. Now, first of all, Irv's doing the introductions, explaining to each other who these people are. So first of all, he explains to Ben Yosef who V is. He says, "Remember I told you that story about the mugger and the Jewish guy who stepped in and saved me? Remember that?" And then he explains what happened. V is now recalling that incident with the mugger. He says, Irv took his ID from his wallet while he was still on the ground. I didn't realize what Irv's intentions were at the time. But then he explains to Ben Yosef, so remember I told you about that mugger who I then killed? So now we learn for the first time that amongst other crimes that Irv Rubin was responsible for was the killing of this African-American man in late 1989 in the San Fernando Valley. So after introducing V to Ben Yosef, explaining, well, he's the guy who saved me from that mugger that I killed. Now he's, exchanging the introductions. Now he's saying, okay, well, that's who V is. Now he's explaining to V who Ben Yosef is. And he says that he is the guy who killed Alex Ode. V responds, what's an Ode? He has no clue. As I said, he's completely unconnected. He's no strong ties to the Jewish community. He comes from a Jewish family, but he wasn't politically aware. So then they had to explain to him. And they did so. According to V, BBY, that's Ben Yosef, laughed out loud and confessed he and Manning were responsible. And then Ben Yosef told him, you would have liked him about Manning. So that's the meeting where V heard Baruch Ben Yosef, Andrew Green, admit and in fact boast about assassinating Alex Ode. Okay. So now we move forward in time. What happened in the intervening years? Irv Rubin continues with his racist campaigns, but in addition to that, they strike an agreement in which they embark upon a whole new set of crimes. According to V, they then engaged in pimping and prostitution. I didn't have any photos of Los Angeles area prostitutes from the 1990s, but I found some from the 1890s. So according to V, in the San Diego area, that they operated like a safe house that was essentially a body house, in which, according to V, we had 6 or 7 prostitutes working with us nearly full-time, 5 days a week, 48 hours a day, roughly $200 an hour. He says that some of these women were basically sold off and never seen again through Irv. So not just prostitution, but slavery and human trafficking were amongst the crimes they committed, according to V. And he says also that Jewish Defense League members benefited from this arrangement because it also doubled as a safe house. That was part of the deal. And he says that he was running this prostitution ring, and the way that Irv participated was not actively part of the day-to-day activities, but that he was the outside investor. That by Irv pumping money into the operation, they were able to get a bigger house with nicer furniture and thereby get more customers, make more money. So with Irv's investment, they were able to expand the operations, and as a result, Irv was paid a pretty penny for his efforts, according to V. Now, after they've been doing this for a while, the police catch on and they arrest V for these crimes and take him to jail. He's now in jail. In the years that followed, as we know, Robert and Rochelle Manning, also implicated in these crimes, they were arrested for another murder altogether, for the murder of a woman in 1980. And eventually, after legal wrangling, they are in fact indicted and extradited and sent back to the United States. Well, Manning is sent back to the United States to face trial for the murder of this woman, Patricia Wilkerson, but he's arrested at their home in 1993, in their Kiryat Arba home. And just hours or days before Rochelle Manning, his wife, was also be extradited to the US to face trial for her involvement in the murder, she had a heart attack, allegedly. So she's till this day buried in Hebron. She never got to to pay for her crimes. In any case, moving forward in the timeline, it's now 1998. V is released from jail for his crimes. He gets out of jail, and already waiting for him is a brand new car that Irv bought for him as a way to say thank you for not ratting me out. You went to jail, you did the hard time, and you didn't tell the cops that I was your silent partner. Thanks for doing me a solid. Here's a brand new car. From then on, according to V, he was Irv's trusted envoy, in his words. And what that means is, because think about it, at that time, as we know, the FBI is investigating Irv for all kinds of crimes. Specifically, in the late 1990s, they were suspected of actually extorting Los Angeles area rappers, Tupac and Eazy-E, of sending them threats and then telling them, well, you're under threat, allow us to provide you with protection. So this protection racket that the JDL operated came under suspicion, and so they were under investigation by the FBI. So Irv couldn't easily communicate with the Kahanists back in Israel. And so he needed someone to be his go-between, someone that no one knew was a member of the JDL. That person was V. And so according to V, he would send faxes, or actually he would receive faxes from the Kahanists in Israel. He says that it was Fuchs, one of Alex Ode's assassins, Israel Fuchs, who set up the fax line. And with this fax line based in Pardesia, they sent faxes to V, and then V would receive the faxes, and then he would physically bring them over to Earl or to Irv, and that way he was the node by which the communication went back and forth between the American Kahanists and the Israeli Kahanists. But it also went both ways, he says. Yes, I was receiving faxes and taking them to Irv, but also I was receiving money from Irv and sending it to the Kahanists in Israel. And he says that Ben Yosef, one of the killers, was the one who set up that post office box in the northern city of Afula. And I did investigate and find that it was very likely used for that very purpose. I was able to find the exact post office and post office box. And in any case, according to V, he would regularly receive tens of thousands of dollars from the Kahanists, money that they'd raised here or made through illicit channels, and then he would send big stacks of money by envelope to Afula, and then from there, the monies would be brought down to support the Kahanist movement. So for the next couple of years, V is the trusted envoy, the point man of communication between the Israeli and American Kahanists. Now, after about a decade of being partners in crime, in Calabasas, California, there was a meeting between Irv and Earl and V, another member of the notorious gang, and they got together, and at this point, V is actually doing reconnaissance work for Irv. Irv asked him to monitor the activities of the local congressman, Darrell Issa. Again, it was not because of any pro-Palestinian position that he'd staked out. Yes, he was an Arab American, but he was a Bushite Republican. You know, there's no question that it wasn't that he was, a strong advocate of Palestinian rights or something like that. In any case, it was clear what the motives were, as V says, because then it wasn't just that he had him monitor Issa, he then asked him to assassinate local judge George Abdallah. What had Abdallah done to deserve this? Why did he deserve to be killed? According to V, Irv said, Irv didn't like Arabs in America running shit. So just the fact that there was an Arab American who actually had reached a prominent position through his own hard work and was nominated to be a court judge, that was enough to justify his assassination. In any case, V was disgusted at this point, and he wanted no part of it. And he told Irv, fuck you, I'm not your shooter, do it yourself, in his words. And he spat in Irv's face and walked out. Well, that was an insult that Irv could not let stand. According to V, Irv sent another one of these gang members to assassinate V. V says that he was at his parents' home. This man came to kill him, but he bested him in combat, laid him down, and about a month later, he's actually arrested himself for crimes that had nothing to do with Irv. As I said, he had a long, colorful criminal career of his own. In any case, since 2000, he's been in jail. The following year, Rubin and Krugel are also arrested. And the reason they're arrested is for plotting to assassinate Congressman Darrell Issa and for plotting to blow up a mosque in Culver City. And we know for a fact, because we know for a fact that it wasn't only about property damage that they planned. They planned to commit mass murder. We know this because we hear words from the man that the FBI used to give up Irv. In other words, they had one of the insiders of the JDL who wore a wire and recorded these men plotting to blow up the mosque. And he says that they planned to blow up not just the mosque, but the part of the mosque that was used as a school for little kids, and that they plotted to blow up the mosque, to explode a bomb in that part of the mosque during school hours. So this was not about sending a message. This was about bloody murder, mass murder.